Theresa May is facing a potential backbench revolt as the first of 3 days of debate starts today over the actual details of the government's Brexit bill.
Rebel Tories are expected to join the SNP and Labour MPs in voting for a series of amendments. Harriet Harman is one of them. She joins us now this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming in. So let's talk about the amendment that you're having debated today. What exactly are you calling for?
Well, there's 3 million EU citizens living in this country. Some have been here for 20, 30 years, they've got their family here and everything, and they just need to know that their residence rights are not going to be torn up because we're Brexiting, we're leaving the EU. So I've got a new clause down which I want to put into this Article 50 bill, as it's called, to make sure that people who've been here perfectly lawfully, working, bringing up their family, are not having the threat of deportation hanging over their heads. So I'm hoping the government will accept that.
Yeah, except that, of course, David Davis, as I understand, has said, you know, we'll do what we can, and our aim is to make sure that these people can stay, not planning on, you know, getting rid of them. But it has to be a negotiating tool, doesn't it? I mean, in real politics, we have millions of UK citizens living in EU countries, and we need to make sure that they have their rights protected. At the same time, that has to be the deal that's done. We can't just do this unilaterally, because what happens if EU countries said, I'm afraid UK citizens have to go back to the UK?
Well, it's either one thing or another, isn't it? Either there's a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the EU citizens who live here, and we can decide about them because they're in our country and we can say to them, or we're going to use them as a negotiating ploy. And if you're going to use them as a negotiating ploy, no wonder they're uncertain, because it might well be that they're going to be used as a sort of tit for tat with all these other EU countries.
Well, what else would you use as a negotiating ploy when it comes to the citizens who live in other countries, other than, unfortunately, the right of residence here?
Well, obviously, the other European countries are not at all pleased that we're leaving the EU, but we want to have a good relationship with them because we want to continue to sell our goods to them and have a good economic trade relationship with them. I think if the first thing we do is threaten to chuck out EU citizens from their countries...
Yeah, nobody's threatening that, are they? We're just saying that they can't actually sort that out without being absolutely sure about what's going to happen to UK citizens elsewhere.
But you see, if you're actually using them as negotiating, that threat has got to be there, hasn't it? If that threat's not there, then they're not any use in negotiating. So I think it would be much better for the government to say, these people who are nurses, who are working in not only public services, but in businesses all around the country, you can stay. That is then a good thing for the other EU countries who will think that that is a decent way of going about things, and just set off on a better footing. I mean, you know, starting off by threatening citizens of other EU countries will just annoy their countries, as well as not being fair. It's not their fault we're leaving the EU. Some of them have got children and grandchildren here.
Well, I'm sure there's an enormous amount of sympathy for that situation, but isn't this just the problem at the heart of all of these negotiations, is that the government's got to make some really tough bargains?
Yes, but it shouldn't use these people as part of a bargaining tool. And I think that they need to be, like, principled and fair about it. It is difficult. There is going to be hundreds of difficult decisions. I mean, big ones and small ones, like what sort of agricultural subsidy are we going to give our farmers? We're going to decide that now. Previously, it's all been the Common Agricultural Policy, and all governments have gone, the Common Agricultural Policy, it's rubbish, it's subsidising farmers. Well, now we'll have to decide whether or not we're going to support our farmers. I mean, that's just one small example, but there's hundreds of others. But I think the government's got to listen to what Parliament is saying, think sensibly and for the long term. And the idea of, well, we're going to make sure we get our way by the threat of possibly insecurity hanging over these 3 million people, it's just not the way to go about it.